In part 2 of topic 1, we are going to be looking at systems and models. We've already talked about how a systems approach will help us in understanding complex environmental issues. So by using systems and models of those models help us simplify the interactions, but also give us a more holistic view of how the Earth works. So a system is a whole that's made up of smaller parts, and each of those parts are interdependent components that perform a function. And you can't remove one part and expect the system to continue to work. Each part is linked together. An example would be a bicycle. If I remove the chain, the bicycle is not going to work correctly. If I remove the brakes, the bicycle is not going to work correctly, or the wheels, or the seat, or any of the parts. They work together as a system. So if we compare a reductionist approach to a holistic approach, a reductionist approach would be looking at each individual part. So we might, if we're talking about the human body, looking at the skeletal system or the digestive system, looking at each individual system. Thinking about the earth, looking at just the water cycle or nitrogen cycle or even an ecosystem. Whereas if we take a more holistic approach, we're looking at how everything works together. So looking at the entire human body or looking at the entire Earth as made up of working systems. We talked about the Gaia hypothesis, where we think of the Earth as a living, breathing being that's made up of systems. And if we remove one of those systems, then the Earth is not going to function. So we're going to be looking at both a reductionist approach and a holistic approach throughout this course. So we're going to look at systems on a range of scales, as large as the universe and the Earth, all the way down to a very small scale. So in the example here, below the Earth, we might look at one specific ecosystem or biome, like a rainforest. And we might even go more specific than that, looking at the Amazon rainforest. Within that ecosystem, I want to look at a riverbank, look at a plant on that riverbank, a leaf of a plant on the riverbank. I might look at a bug on the leaf of a plant on the riverbank. So we can continue going down into a further and further small scale. So really getting into those small systems. When we talk about systems, we are looking at interactions between biotic, which are living things, all of our species, and non-living or abiotic constituent parts. So energy and matter would be considered abiotic. So we're going to be looking at inputs and outputs into storages and how those make up systems. When we draw system diagrams, we are going to use boxes and arrows to show storages and flows. There are things that flow into the system and things that flow out of a system. Usually those are going to be energy and matter. Things can be transferred or transformed through a system. A transfer is simply a change in location, whereas a transformation is either a change in the chemical makeup, a change in state, or a change in energy. So looking at just transfers, one example would be the movement of matter through living organisms. So when a carnivore eats another animal, that matter is transferred from one body to another. It might be in a non-living process like the water cycle, water being carried by a stream from one location to another. As long as it's still liquid, it's a transfer. The movement of energy, when ocean currents carry heat from the equator towards the poles, that would be an example of a transfer. Now, transformations are when you actually convert either chemically or change the state of the object or the input that you are moving. So with matter, when glucose is converted into starch in plants, that would be a transformation because that is a chemical change. Energy, when light is converted to heat, that would be a transformation. Burning fossil fuels, we're transferring matter into energy. Or energy into matter through photosynthesis, where we take solar energy and it's converted into glucose. Now, transfers and transformations both require energy, but transfers are going to require less energy because you're just moving from one location to another, so transfers are going to be more energy efficient. Now, looking at the following, which are transfers and transformations. So when I have dead matter, if I have dead organic matter entering a lake, that would be a transfer. If I have that dead organic matter decomposing, where I have a chemical reaction, that would be a transformation. Okay? Looking at the water cycle, evaporation. That is a transformation. Remember that evaporation is when we change water from the liquid state to the vapor state or gas. Runoff would be a transfer. So when you have runoff from a rainstorm that runs into a stream, that feeds into a river, that feeds into an ocean, the water is remaining liquid. It has not changed state, so it's simply a transfer. All right, there are three types of systems. The first is an open system. An open system exchanges matter and energy with its surroundings. A closed system exchanges energy but not matter. So if an example of a closed system would be the Earth itself. We have light energy coming from the sun when we have heat energy that's re-radiated by Earth. Most systems are going to be open systems. Another example of a closed system would be the Biosphere 2, where we have attempted to create a habitable closed system on Earth. And the reason that we attempt to do this is so that ultimately we can provide a way for humans to live on another planet. The Biosphere 2 was built in Arizona towards the end of the 1980s. It was mainly used to explore space colonization. It was never able to quite produce enough food to adequately sustain the participants, because the idea was they wouldn't need to bring anything in from the outside. Also, the oxygen levels became low, and they ended up having to pump in oxygen, which defeats the purpose of the biosphere. The third and final type of system is an isolated system, and these are hypothetical. That's where you would exchange neither matter nor energy. The only thing that would be an example of an isolated system would be the universe itself. Okay, system diagrams are models that are used to simplify a real system. It helps us with our understanding, and they're also useful in helping predict changes. So for an example, here we have a fish, and it shows all of the inputs and outputs that are required to keep that fish alive. So if we think that the fish as a system itself. Now, this is simply a model. We could go into much more detail and show the systems that make up the systems. This model here is a quantitative model, so notice there are numbers on the arrows. It shows us how carbon flows, so this is an example of the carbon cycle. Now the width of the arrows, you notice some are wider than others, and the ones that have the wide arrows have larger numbers, so the width of the arrows shows us the amount of carbon. There are also, the numbers show us the specific amounts. Inside the boxes are the storages or stock. So boxes are used to show storage, arrows are used to show flows, whether those are transfers or transformations. So the benefits of using models is they are a way to simplify the complexities of real systems. They help us predicting changes, so we can, in a model, we can change the inputs to predict the outputs. We can use them to see patterns, and they help us to visualize either things that are very small or things that are very large. Now, there are possible problems with systems. Anytime that we simplify a system, often it's oversimplified. When we are using models for predictions, their accuracy is going to depend on the skill and bias of the people that are making them. Different people are going to interpret models differently. Just think about different weather stations. They use different weather models, and they interpret the results to make their predictions differently. So with these different models, we have different outcomes. So it's hard to tell which are more reliable than others. So in class, we're going to look at several other examples of systems and practice drawing system models.